Hello, Cam followers. I won't tell you how close a call this was tonight. Having just got back from Kettering about 1 minute ago, I am here with the lovely Dr. Amber Batson to talk to you about something that's really, really important in managing osteoarthritis. First of all, I'd like to say a massive thank you to our sponsor this year, Big Barker. We would not be here without you. We really would not be here without them. So we're really proud to be associated with Big Barker. And one of the major reasons is that they really believe in evidence-based approaches to management as well. And they put their bed for a pilot study with the University of Pennsylvania to see whether they could back up their claims that it improves mobility, improves sleep, improves pain. And the pilot study was very positive, which is absolutely legendary. So thank you, Big Barker, for actually putting your money where your mouth is. And thank you for sponsoring us. So I'm going to put you away. Back to Dr. Amber Batson. We've got a few spammers. So let me just get rid of whoever that person is. I don't know if you've seen it. Block user and delete. Amber, please tell us all about yourself while I get rid of the spam, and then we'll crack on.
So I am a vet and I do behaviour work as well, and I've done both of those things for quite a while. I've been a vet, 20 something years, and I got into behaviour really early on. So I've been thinking about behaviour in my kind of clinical approach to medical cases, as well as from a purely behavioural perspective for a long time. I run my own business called Understand Animals, which I set up in 2007. So that's 15 years old now, which is just phenomenal, and provide a lot of education worldwide on behaviour and welfare issues, as well as still working in clinical practice and as well as doing legal expert witness work too.
You do a lot, don't you? And your fans are here already. I hope they're not the spammers, because I'm deleting them all. Right, so we're talking about something tonight which is going to be applicable to anybody that is managing musculoskeletal chronic pain in their dogs. And it's something that's really important to me. So today I was up in Kettering lecturing amazingly to Norbrook. Thank you, Norbrook, for hosting me. And talking about how I grew up with 2 Labradors. They both made it to 15 years old. But my parents weren't of a high income. They weren't going to be able to throw stem cells and platelet-rich plasma and all of that high-end stuff at them. It's very much about conservative management plans. And this fits massively into that. And it's a really important aspect. So first of all, let's talk about what is enrichment so people know what we're talking about.
Yeah, well, different people try and give it different definitions. So, we'll try and just and there's not a definition given specifically by individuals, but kind of considering lots of those. Basically, we think about an environmental change or an increased complexity within the environment that results in improved biological functioning. So there does need to be something which actually changes in the body for the good of that body. And when I say the body, I am including the brain, as part of the body, basically.
Okay.
And that's quite a wide definition, realistically, because obviously environmental change, environmental complexity, all of what type, and that's something we can talk about in a minute. How do we categorize types of enrichment, and what sorts of biological functions might improve. And of course, within that, then when we're thinking about a chronically painful dog, well, what specific elements of that would help the arthritic dog.
Perfect. So I know that enrichment's a bit like the word holistic, where it's kind of got abused a little bit, and it's very hard to put your finger on it, what it is. And on talking to Sarah Heath, who I love Sarah Heath, just says it as it is, and she's like, well, to be honest, a lot of what people consider as enrichment is just necessity for life. We've got these companion animals living in our world, in our houses, in our lifestyles, our busy lifestyles, and we put down a few slow feeders, go, we've enriched their life. Well, actually, no,
it's needed.
It's needed. So go into that in a bit more detail, because people will think, oh God, we're being pedantic, but I think it's really important.
Well, no, and exactly. And when I kind of teach, educate on enrichment, I think it's really important to try and define between the two. When we think about a living being who is in our care, and obviously with an animal like the dog, they are very, very much, a pet dog anyway, are very, very much in our, not just guardianship, but they are under our control. Yeah, we can totally control what they have access to, when they have access to it. And, people who've listened to me before will often hear on my little rant that I often have about toileting in the dog. How many animals, domestic animals, do we actually control when they're allowed to pass urine and feces? And as somebody who, is here in this live, having just probably really needed the toilet after a really long drive, how important it is to be able to fill that function. Yeah, we all know that. We've all been there many times, or I was there earlier today myself, desperate for a wee. And, but in all seriousness, the pet dog, if we're pet cats, so they have a cat flap or they have a litter tray. If a guinea pig, a rabbit, a rat, I saw a lovely rat in my clinic last night, and they all, same thing. They have access to a litter tray, or perhaps even the outside, if they're, a rabbit or guinea pig with a warren type system. Horses, even when we keep them in gilded cages that we might call stables, they go to the toilet in that space. There is really no other species that we say you can't go to the toilet for 4 to 6, 8 hours while we're outside. So, we've got to really think about this concept of basic needs. Basic needs are things which keep your body in true health, and what we call homeostasis, really, which is in a reasonable balance, a balance that's compatible with, not optimal life, but just surviving. Yeah. So, and that is things like being able to manage your blood pressure, being able to go eliminate your waste products when you need to, and being able to drink when you're thirsty, eat when you're hungry, get enough sleep and enough rest. Those basic needs which allow our bodies to survive. And therefore, when we think about enrichment, creating change or complexity to improve biological functioning, if I've done a lot of, seen a lot of things, like I've been involved in puppy farming cases and assessments and that sort of stuff. And if we go and we see a dog who perhaps lives in a really, really tiny kennel, for all of their days, and that dog gets fed once a day and only gets let out once a day for toileting opportunities and a little bit of a stretch, and other than that has to go to the toilet in their kennel, etc. And we now say, okay, well, what we're going to do is give them some variety in their food, or we're going to give them a couple of beds to choose from. I have no doubt that's going to biologically improve things for that dog, because they were kind of below the threshold for base need meeting anyway. And that's why there's a welfare concern, So when we think about enrichment, we shouldn't really be thinking about meeting basic needs being having the ability to feel safe. As an example, being able to get rid of your hunger, satiate your hunger, and alleviate your thirst. And maintain, therefore, adequate nutrient and sugar levels and fluid levels in the body. Being able to eliminate your waste. You go away. Being able to eliminate your waste product.
It's so relevant. Have you read this yet?
No, I haven't.
I'm going to send it to you because it's a beautiful book. And it does talk about the fact that we've forgotten what many species' baseline needs are. And for so many years, we've farmed, or we've had them as companions, and we've drifted away from what their baseline was. And exactly.
So if we're missing a baseline, and we've got the point about enrichment is you've got to start from a base level of knowledge about the species. And how I work with regularly on a behavioural and a medical level. I work with dogs, cats and horses predominantly, a little bit of rabbits and some other, little furries as well, but predominantly dogs, cats and horses. And of course, when I'm thinking about enrichment for a horse, actually quite different than enrichment for a dog, which is different than enrichment for a cat, because we've got to think about what their base species needs are, and then what happens in then the kind of historical natural environment, which would add to the kind of complexities and challenges which would boost their biological function and allow them to not just survive but thrive in their natural environment, the things that they are evolutionarily prepared to do.
Okay.
You know, if I was to say to a horse, I'm sorry, if I was to say to a horse, I'm going to add in a scratching post, or, you know, a lot of vertical platforms, my ponies are going to look at me like I'm an absolute nutcase. Whereas actually, if I was to do something like potentially, I don't know, scatter feed for a cat, you know, horses are grazers, they should be nibbling and eating and moving all the time. Well, that's not how a cat's food's presented.
Yeah.
So, you know, we've got to think about that kind of, we call that the ethogram, you know, the list of normal behaviors that are kind of relevant to that species in a natural environment that they've evolved to do to kind of not only survive but thrive in that environment.
Okay. So 2 things to keep everybody like tantalized. We're going to just quickly talk about a dog because we're canine arthritis management, and a couple of things that you would classify as enrichment. So people have just got something to hang their hat on. They know where we're heading. Otherwise, they're going to go, oh, they're talking all academic. Oh, I don't understand. And the next thing,
we've done that, but now we can move on to practical thoughts, can't we? Really.
Thoughts. But the other thing I also wanted to include in your ethogram, in your basic requirements, is surely cognitive function, being able to use their brain. But that's quite often people forget that because they go, oh, the ability to get their food and drink when they want and poo when they want to poo, but also to use your brain and to socialize and to kind of like. So let's just start with giving people a practical a description of what enrichment might be, so then people don't switch off and go, this is never going to be applicable to me, and then we'll talk about what happens to the body and brain.
Yeah, well, again, we can think about different categories, but from a practical perspective. So as an example, a dog is a highly social animal. In that domestication process, they are social towards other dogs. Now, not all dogs. No dog needs to be pally with every dog in their environment. I'm not pally with all humans. You know, none of us are. And of course, that's a lot. Some of that's to do with life experience and, you know, all sorts of things. But so the dog has, through the domestication process, also got a tendency in many situations, although not all still, to be looking for social contact from humans. Mm-hmm. So we can think, so as an example, in enrichment, we often talk about the social category. If they're a social species, like the horse, like the dog, like the human, then we would be thinking about the social element. And that's really important, because if we think about a dog with arthritis who has got chronic pain, one of the things which we know happens to those individuals is they often withdraw, and they become more socially withdrawn, predominantly because they feel vulnerable and fragile and painful. You don't want to go to a dog park and have dogs rushing up into your personal space if you've got hip pain, elbow pain, shoulder pain. You know, you have a bigger personal space around you that you don't want others to enter. And that's often out of your control. You just, you know, kind of use that phrase about control and choices, etc. That can be out of your control in certain context, in certain situations, certain environments, like the dog park, as an example. And therefore, those dogs might not really want to be going to that place anymore. That might be a real stressor to them. But that doesn't mean to say they don't want social contact. Mm-hmm. So the social contact that dog might want is if they've got familiar canine friends they've known for a long time. Maybe those canine friends find it easier to read their body language, you know, or maybe they're a similar age to them, so they're not as rambunctious and over the top as maybe an adolescent or a juvenile. You know, I often have this horrible thought, and, you know, and I've been there, I have done this myself, but, you know, so, and it's therefore individual and horses for courses, as we say, you know, oh, my dog's getting elderly in their years, I think I'll get a puppy.
Yes,
you know, because, you know, it doesn't mean to say it doesn't work. I had 3 going on geriatrics when we got our 2 puppies, who are now pretty much 12 years old themselves, so they're now in the geriatric category. Yeah. But, you know, I don't want to get down the kind of multi-puppy route. They're different puppies from different breeds and backgrounds, blah, blah, blah. But one of the reasons why I was like, well, if we're going to get one puppy, and I'm not going into the rescue things, this was 12 years ago, and actually we were gifted one of those puppies. I'm not going to get just one because it's not fair on the 3 geriatric dogs. You know, so it's not that it wouldn't work, but we've got to put an awful lot of care and thought into that. So maybe, you know, the social needs might be a dog that you've known for a long time who's of similar kind of disposition to you. But the other thing that we can do is think about the odor. And, you know, an awful lot of people who've participated in my events and courses, etc., have started doing a lot of toy swapping, which is fantastic, really interesting. So maybe my dog's been friends for quite some time with, you know, a dog, I don't know, in the neighborhood or whatever. But, you know, now because of the restrictions in mobility, they don't get to see one another. Maybe it doesn't feel that appropriate anymore. Let's toy swap, because then they get one another's odor, and as well as getting different, you know, experiences through different toys, or some bedding or some coat brushings or something like that, that they can therefore have that familiarity from one another. How many of us in our past have probably borrowed a partner's or child's piece of clothing when we're going to be away from them for a period of time, so that we can have that odor, you know? And so that's something that we could do that's a social element of enrichment, as an example.
Amazing. So everybody that's listening goes, I can imagine half the room are going, oh my God, that's totally achievable. I'm so going to buy into it. And I can imagine another half of the room, a bit like first opinion practice, going, what? Because I don't know why, but my brain just drifted into listening to a TED talk a few years ago where people were talking about you know how we used to have physical health, you know, so PT education at school, so physical and health education.
Yeah.
But this guy on his TED talk was talking about psychological health, psychological cleanliness. Yeah. And we as humans are beginning to realize the importance of mental health, psychological cleanliness. But it is really coming into first opinion practice as well, making sure that our dogs and our cats are socially, cognitively, emotionally fulfilled as well as physically. So that's a lovely idea, and it's totally affordable and easy to implement. Perfecto. I like it.
And we can also, of course, we can extend that to other animals and quickie beyond dogs. Of course, it's the same thing with humans. If they were humans, my mum's over babysitting this evening. She's known my dogs ever since they were puppies, you know, and I say babysitting's a bit unfair on my 6-year-old child sitting. And, you know, and our English Bull Terrier absolutely adores her. And when I came over to my office earlier, my English Bull Terrier was like lead on his back, half on her, like this is heaven because Granny's visiting. Yeah. And I know full well that if we couldn't see her for some reason for weeks on end, he would probably really enjoy having access to some of her clothing or a pillowcase or something like that. Because he'd be like, oh, wow. And because he does it with us, you know, he will go and actually find bits of our clothing or my son's toys and lie near them. You know, we've got to remember how different they are.
There's still also this enrichment. I think a lot of people immediately think of a well-packaged toy that comes from Pets at Home, and it's a brightly colour and it's plastic and it's to do with feeding. So allowing people's brain to drift into these more fulfilling potentially, but totally accessible is lovely. I love Carla's. She's gonna float my boat all evening. I'll wait. She's just put it into a nice little takeaway. Carry on, Carla. This is exactly what it's about. You know, fantastic. And everybody that has joined us, please say where you're from, because it's so nice when we get comments like, hey, I'm from Glasgow, hey, I'm from Alaska, hey, I'm from Suffolk. So please make Amber feel absolutely loved to bits by saying where you're from. That'd be great. So let's go into the next bit where we actually talk about what enrichment, which we now know is fulfilling above the basal needs.
Yeah.
What are we doing with that? What's happening? Body, brain, etc.
Well, we'll start with just tapping into where we were. You just talked about, you know, kind of emotional health, psychological health. And in the revamping of animal welfare that we've had going on the last 2 or 3 years, and we talk about now, you know, things like the 5 pillars and the 5 domains now of animal welfare, a big part of that has been about positive emotional experience. before that, if we go all the way back, and I'm going to bore everyone with this, but, if we go back to the 1950s and we talked about Bramble's 5 freedoms, welfare used to be about freedom from. It was about kind of, oh, there's the wine, jealousy.
So sorry.
But it was about freedom from. It was about kind of, good welfare was about avoiding negative experiences. Mm-hmm. But, over the next 70 years, hate to say that, we've really transitioned into that good welfare needs to also equally encompass adding in positive experiences. Yeah, it's not just avoiding the negative. Yeah, and so when we think about what benefits can we have from enrichment, one of the big benefits, particularly for an animal who's in pain, can be making sure that they end up shifting into a more positive emotional state. We have a posh phrase for that, which is positive emotional valence. We often, as humans, we just talk about things like optimism, don't we? Mm-hmm. And, and having just a positive emotional state. And we know that positive emotional states can reduce pain perception. So it's a really, really important part of it.
And it's so logical. It's just so logical. But often, and I apologise to the vet profession when I'm just going to come out with something a bit blunt. Sometimes you can see your colleagues kind of glaze over. Oh, she's talking the fluffy stuff again. Oh, it's like the cherry on top that you don't actually need. You're like, no, it's like integral. It's so important. And we know that in human healthcare, that if we can bring people, get them more social, get them to do the Sudokus, get them up and moving, it is going to have a massive impact on their pain perception. Absolutely. Thank you, Amber. Carry on.
Well, and then sort of tied in other things, we know that lots and lots of studies have looked at the impact of enrichment. Well, I'm going to tap into one element of that, though, quickly, which is when we've done scientific studies, and there have been a lot of them, typically we talk about putting an animal into an environment in which they live, which is enriched. Okay, we're not talking about giving them a food puzzle toy for 5 minutes twice a day, mm-hmm. or letting them spend some time with their mates for 5 minutes twice a day. We do studies where we put them into an enriched environment, so increased social complexity, increased exploration in their, having more space, having more toys, having more platforms. Actually, most of them don't include much about food. So, that's something that we'll probably come back to, because there can be some negatives about the food specific for arthritic dogs that I really do want us to touch on briefly. Yep. And it's not that that's a negative. It's not that we'd never do it, but they've just got to be aware that there may be more limitations in arthritic dogs than in others, potentially. But anyway, so when we think about actually studies that have shown changes that happen in the body, it's not just an added thing for a short period of time. It's about making the whole environment enriched. And so therefore we do have to get our heads around that. We have to be thinking about, okay, like you say, it's not just popping down, another dog's toy once a week, or, the odor of a familiar person every other day. We do have to be thinking about a little bit more frequent than that. And that's why we need a lot of tools in our toolbox. Mm-hmm. If we can get a lot of tools in our toolbox, and I promise they are cheap if they're not free, and once we get our heads around it and we start incorporating it into life, it does become super easy. Then we do things like reduce stress. Now, again, increased stress. And I've written an article about this, which is in the CAM member zone.
It's going to be in the member zone. It's not yet, but it will.
No, it will be. That's true. I checked that earlier. Yeah. It's coming imminently.
I'm working, Amber. I'm working.
I know. You've got other things to do. You're a very busy lady. And the stress, stress can exacerbate osteoarthritis. For a number of reasons, which I'm not going to go into now. I'll just leave it at that. So if enrichment can reduce stress, then that's another real positive for any individual, but particularly the osteoarthritic individual. We also may have opportunities to have an impact on certain muscular movements, and postures and stuff. And actually, getting up and moving our body is good for our cardiovascular health, which helps our arthritis through blood flow changes. It also obviously can help us with certain elements of our kind of, our musculoskeletal system strength. Although, we've got to do that on an individual level. What's appropriate, where are their weaknesses? What can we improve? What isn't going to be able to improve? That would be an important part of individualizing an enrichment plan. But also, yeah, well, everyone probably knows I'm going to mention gut bugs very briefly. There have been a few very recent studies which have shown that environmental enrichment has a very positive impact on the bugs that are in our guts. And we also know that the bugs that are in our guts drive our immune system, and a whole host of other factors. So if we can have a positive impact on those gut bugs, then that probably will help the osteoarthritic dog particularly.
You've just given me a massive idea. So we've got our It's My Home 2 tool, and I feel quite uncomfortable because it's just trying to prevent harm. So it's very straight-laced and black and white and a bit kind of. I could add a whole section about how to improve happiness. So avoid harm, so It's My Home 2 tool, guys, is on the website. I'm sure one of the Canbasters will put it on there, and it's all about slippery floors, stairs, all of the hazards to a physically vulnerable. We could expand it and go, okay, we've done the physically vulnerable section, now let's go into the positive section.
Because it is about, kind of minimizing that tissue damage, isn't it? Of course it is. And it's about minimizing the stressors as well, for sure. But the opposite side of that is very much about making this still a life worth living. And I think that's a lot of issues. I mean, I've been a vet for, 23 years or whatever, and always worked in clinical practice through all of that time. So I've dealt with a lot of owners, guardians, caregivers, whatever you want to call them, for pets and other animals, horses, if whether you call them pets or not, with arthritis, and trying, and thinking about kind of, what happens with that relationship. And a lot of people feel really guilty and negative because they know that it's much harder to fulfill their dog now, and they worry about that. And we focus a lot in the dog world on the walk. The walk becomes this huge focus. Once my dog's not able to do their walk anymore, then I'm probably starting to think about euthanasia. I had exactly that conversation with an owner last night. And actually, it's not that a walk isn't important, because of course walk, I'm not saying for any moment that exercise isn't important for dogs on a whole host of levels, but it's not the only source of positive experience. And many of you have heard me say before, you can bring that walk home. You can go out and do the walk, take a shopping bag with you, pick up a few items on the way.
The only thing I'm going to do, I'm just going to be a facetious interjection here. I know why many people have that as a defining thing, is because when you're managing your best friend and choosing when is the time, it's very grey. And I think we as a society, a generation, are beginning to realize waiting for them to stop eating and drinking is actually pretty shit, because they are so core requirements that even a dog that's got a very poor quality of life, in a lot of pain, will still manage to eat and drink. So the inability to walk is a very defining moment for owners. And I think what I found since running Holly's Army is giving owners permission that doesn't need to be your defining moment. We've got dog trolleys, we've got, harnesses, help them up. Oh my God, we've seen it take off. We've even thought about getting a t-shirt made saying, Holly's Army believes in wheels. because a lot of people are embracing it because they don't feel that society's judging them for putting a large dog in a trolley. And get into the park, let them have a mooch, put them back in the trolley. But I think that's one of the reasons that is a defined marker where people.
And it's a fairly categorical measure for a lot of people. It's an easier thing to measure. If my dog can do the 20 to 30 minute round the block, then I know that's what they can do. But when they can't do that, well, then that's a very, very obvious measure. If we talk about other measures like changes in muscle tone, or if we talk about changes in body language, well, not only is that a new skill set for an awful lot of the caregivers and owners anyway, but also, well, it's a gradual, it can be a kind of gradual thing. Where's the line? Gosh, how much muscle do they need to lose? How often do they have their ears back a bit more in their tail? So the walk's an obvious thing. And I'm not for one moment trying to suggest that it can't be part of our assessment, but I guess it's almost coming I don't know if it's from the same side, but a different angle, is that sometimes we do see individuals, and again, it's no judgment because I've been there myself. You know, I had a beautiful, beautiful Labrador when I graduated, and he had a really horrible condition called osteochondrosis dissecans from the time he was only 12 weeks of age. And so, and this is kind of what took me down the whole behavior path all the way from that beginning. And he had horrible degenerative joint change and chronic pain from even by the time he was probably about 5 or 6 months of age. So, and I myself therefore would have considered about, oh gosh, well, how much can he manage? And, is this a good quality of life based on his exercise? It's not, but sometimes what we might do is that we might make that such a focus, and we might start actually looking at it. Well, I need my dog to do the 20 to 30 minute walk, because otherwise I've got to start making decisions. And the point is that actually we don't need the dog to be doing something. We see dogs being walked along almost reluctantly, panting and limping. And some of it can be because we just feel it's such an integral part of their well-being. And
that's when I told you about it the other day. Have you ever seen a bull chucker in an oil painting? Have you? Do you remember that one? In that we've begun to realise, we've begun to associate things with having a dog that are not in history. This is a recent belief. And if we go back, and we did this the other day chatting about it, it's only in the last 50, 60 years that we've had these routines, these associations with bones and bulls and bull chuckers and stuff. It's look back through our companionship for years. That's what I'm trying to say.
It was a different relationship and a different environment, wasn't it? Absolutely.
Yeah.
But the point is, there are things that we can, if we think about, kind of the elements that a dog gets, the positives that a dog gets from a walk. Okay, that's a nice way to think about enrichment to a degree, because there might actually, of course, be the physical mobility, and the physical mobility element of it is slightly raising their heart rate, or really raising it depending on what level of activity they're doing, but it's improving cardiovascular function, respiratory function, and that's really that's helpful, and it's certainly great, in particular in before geriatric years, to kind of prolong longevity of life and offset all sorts of things like obesity, which would be really important to consider. It's still important for us, but when I get up out of my chair now and I walk to the other side of the room and back, I have actually elevated my heart rate a little bit. I have had some exercise. And lots and lots of studies, particularly in older humans, have shown that just increasing our general day-to-day walking activity can be really, really beneficial. So it doesn't necessarily have to be hard and fast, to get some benefits from it. But that's only one element of it. When your dog goes out on their walk, what they're also doing is experiencing life through their senses. And sensory is a category of enrichment. So what am I experiencing through my senses? So of course the dog, primarily olfactorily driven. So, that's it's a sniff. Many, many years ago, I was introduced by a participant of one of my courses in Belgium to the concept of sniffari. That's what she called it. Take the dog on a sniffari rather than on a walk, which I always thought was a lovely, and now I hear that term an awful lot more than I did back then. But, so there's that element of just the dog is then, as well as just moving around, a really almost separate part, but they're not mutually exclusive, is sniffing, looking, hearing, feeling, and maybe, if you're a scavenger, tasting. And it's important we also remember there's more than 5 senses. We recognise that there is at least 8 senses in the body.
Go on then. Throw them at me.
Oh God, well, don't start with the 5. I always struggle to remember. We've just done those 5.
Proprioception be a sense?
Well, exactly. So then we add in proprioception, which is knowing where your body is in space and time. Being able to position yourself and knowing where you are. Then we have equilibrioception, really posh word, which basically is dealt with by the vestibular system, the fluid in our inner ear, which is about it carries on from proprioception, but it's more than knowing where your body is. It's about being able to position and move yourself in space and time.
Yeah.
So knowing if you're accelerating or decelerating, and what sort of tilt you're on.
Yeah.
And then the other one, as a minimum, and this probably really needs dividing up. That's why we'd say it's a minimum of 8 senses, is what we call interoception. So interoception is being able to recognize what's going on inside us and feel that, like I'm hungry and respond to it, like I'm thirsty and respond to it, like I need the toilet and I can respond to it. That's, so the stuff, a lot of the other stuff, we're thinking about external senses when we think about seeing and smelling and hearing. It's stuff coming from the outside world into our brain, whereas interoception is what's coming from our inside and being able to respond to that effectively.
I need to butt in, because this has touched a proper soul nerve for me. Thank you, Natalie. I think that is absolutely beautiful, what I've just read. And it takes me back to one of our followers right in the beginning. And she wrote to me and she said, I've never had to watch a dog grow old before, and it's really hard. And it makes me almost tear up. It is bloody difficult looking after an older dog. They're like your best mate, but they become your grandma. You don't know whether you're doing the right thing or not. So well done. Thank you for popping in and saying that.
Definitely. That's a great phrase, isn't it? Yeah. And I see it in my own dogs. Say our dogs are approaching 12, and they both have increased fragilities in slightly different ways. One is increasing in cognitive fragility. I have no doubt about that. She's showing a bit more anxiety. She's become a bit more clingy, but she can still, physically function very well and would still like to rush around and do all these stuff. And she can do that. She doesn't seem to have too much pain, which is amazing because she's had 3 major knee surgeries. Whereas the other one, cognitively, I'm pretty all there, but I've got some other physical issues which are popping in. And it's a really hard journey, isn't it? And it's something that we kind of often, so much emphasis is put on puppy socialization and puppy training and enjoy your puppy.
I want geriatric groups. I want chronic pain clubs, geriatric groups. Definitely. I think because, as you say, and don't take offense, people, but as a vet of 21 years, you have owners come in and they're like, I've got a new puppy. I want the best of this, this, and this. I want the best bed. I want the best harness. I want the best lead. I want the best food. I want the best. And then you have this other age category. You're like, oh, the grey muzzles, come on, let's get a little social group going down here, because
people want it though. They do want it. They know it. It's like the guy I was chatting to last night. He's got a 13-year-old, and I didn't meet the dog in person because it'd been seen a couple of days earlier by a colleague. But I think it was something like a bull mastiff or something, a large breed dog, like 60-kilo dog, and it's reached 13. So that's a really good age. But he's got a whole host of medical issues, and he's feeling. He said, I just want him to be pain-free and still enjoy his life, enjoy what time he's got left. So we feel it, but I agree. We don't necessarily have enough support around us as to how to provide for that. Yeah. And the medical element of it, the kind of disease treatment, the pain treatment, that's only one facet of it.
Yeah, definitely.
That's the thing, isn't it? And that's why we want to talk about more practical elements of enrichment.
Absolutely. But I think also we need a societal push for this, because I know that when I did the big walk with Holly and I had my dog buggy, which had my saddlebags, and we carried all the stuff for 8 days, at first I felt a little bit like, oh, people are going to judge me. I've got a medium-sized dog in a big trolley. They're going to think, oh, she can't let go. Oh, bless her. Yeah. Oh, all right. Is she being a bit cruel to be kind, And I was really worried about it. And then once we actually got on the way, I realised how it helped her massively physically. Like, she was better physically by the end of it because she kept popping in and out, but cognitively, the amount of attention she got, and I would totally get a buggy tomorrow. But I had that challenge, my own challenge of how were people going to judge me with this choice. And I think it applies to this age category of what we do for young dogs compared to what we do with senior dogs. You go in Pets at Home, there's puppy bloody channels everywhere. There's no senior dog row. I think we need to change.
I'm having a few connection issues I can't see it's at my end, but just so you know, you keep freezing on me.
Okay, I can see you now. Can I?
I grasp that what you were saying ish, but I don't know whose
Yeah,
end it's on.
I just think society, we need to kind of really push this one forward, that we love our dogs no matter what age category they are, and all these big pet chains start thinking about the senior. Let's push this idea forward. Right, let's now talk about enrichment. Let's how we can take this forward.
Well, so we were talking about the sensory element of the walk. So let's stick with senses for a moment then.
Yeah.
And let's think about, well, when a dog goes out on a walk, they use their noses. So we've already touched on one element of, well, we could bring some smell from their previously friendly dogs or previously friendly humans, or maybe it's some other species as well. Maybe they used to hang out with the yard cat a lot, or etc., and now they don't do that anymore. So it's not just limited obviously to dogs and humans, and we could bring that odor, some of that odor in. And it is about choice. It's not about presenting in a way where they can't move away. It needs to be put somewhere where they can access it if they would choose to, or choose not to, of course. And I think early on in my enrichment experience, I remember I was talking to her at a wedding, actually, really randomly. I bumped into a previous equine client at somebody's wedding a couple of months ago, and she was the first equine client, like 20 years ago, 18 years ago, that I introduced to environmental enrichment for a horse that got put on confinement because of an injury. And we were chatting about it, and she said for them it changed their world, it changed the relationship. They've still got that horse even though she hasn't been rideable for 10 years, etc. But I remember one of the first things we talked about some really basic stuff, but like apple bobbing for the horse. And by the way, you can do stuff like that for dogs as well. Obviously, make sure it's the right size bit so there'll never be any choke, etc. Make the water often needs to be shallow. But kibble floats really well on shallow water, but maybe they like little bits of fruit or vegetables that might float like that too. So, there's options there for dogs. And also we just talked about hanging up an old Wellington boot, a child's Wellington boot, with something flavoured on it, like some Marmite or some brown sauce or something like that. The horse might have a little bit of honey. And I remember she came back to me a week later and she said she won't do any of it. Won't do any of it. It was totally pointless. And that really resonated with me, because I thought, well, gosh, why doesn't the horse want to do it? And it basically turned out that it was too hard. So we've taken a whole apple and we've put it in a full bucket of water. She does not have the skill set to get that apple out. Now that must be really frustrating. So therefore we might even lose some of the
frustration is a negative thing that could actually
stressful for some individuals.
Yeah.
But also it's not giving her the positive experience. So we're losing that positive element as well. And it was the same with the Wellington boot, because they'd hung it in the middle. And the thing with the middle, particularly with a horse, that's on a confinement, or if a dog's on, or cat's on crate rest, that you're imposing into their personal space, that limited personal space they've got. So now she's having to work around to avoid being boshed by the hanging Wellington boot, but she also can't get the paste off, so she can smell it, but it was too high and it moved too quickly. So when we think about enrichment, we always have to think about the skill set of the individual we're introducing it to, and are we presenting it in a way in which they will be able to win? They will have positive experience easily.
And that just goes back to everything about OA management. So I've just driven back from Kettering. I'm listening to lecture after lecture after lecture, because there's so much brilliant stuff online now. And, there's all these different aspects that you can bring into chronic musculoskeletal pain management. But at the end of the day, none of it comes with a promise. You have to monitor to see whether it's worked. And this is the same. There's no point in plonking it down, disappearing for 3 hours and just going, oh, well, I put it down, it's all right. You've got to see how they engage with it, and you've got to see whether it's pleasant or not. But that isn't any different to everything else that we do. If you put them on a non-steroidal, is it working? If you put platelet-rich plasma in a stifle, has it helped? We have this terrible tendency to tick list. It's like making a recipe. That's how I cook anyway. I cook terribly. Shove it in the oven, it's going to be okay. Generally isn't. So, but it's the same, isn't it? You have to check that your choice, your decision is having the beneficial effect that you'd like.
And the only difference, though, with something like medicine or physiotherapy or hydrotherapy with the osteoarthritic dog and enrichment is enrichment's immediate.
Right.
You know, I mean, non-steroidals, yeah, they can, you know, make some animals, like if I've got hip pain, I take ibuprofen, it may well make me feel a lot better within 2 hours. But overall, we're often thinking about a cumulative effect that, you know, might, you know, let's reassess them at 2 weeks and at 4 weeks, etc. Same with hydro or physio, etc. But with enrichment, they should be able to get positive benefit out of it immediately. So there's no point leaving that Wellington boot with honey smeared on it for 2 or 3 weeks and then going, okay, well, she finally learned the skill set. She should get positivity out of it the first time.
I love it.
And then we can make it a little bit more complex the next day. You know, it might be that we just move
Carla,
it.
write that down. So obvious, but so necessary. It has to have good engagement first time around. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the other thing about enrichment too. And it perhaps, if we're thinking about older dogs, like senior geriatric dogs with osteoarthritis, maybe this is a little bit different. But when we're thinking about younger dogs with chronic pain, which of course, sadly, we're seeing more and more of, we do need to think about enrichment's only enriching whilst it brings some level of fun, stimulation, cognitive capacity. So, you know, I see forums now where people are like, oh, well, you know, I've created this really complex puzzle for my 10-week-old puppy. And, you know, and gosh, you know, why can't they do it yet? Or they can already do it that. And I always think, why try to set up something really, really complex when your puppy's only 10? Because where are you going to go with this? What are you going to do for the dog's rest of their life? If they can do everything you offer by the time they're 5 months old, you're going to have a pretty bored adolescent. You know, so I was thinking about that when my son was telling me what some certain words mean earlier, and because his vocabulary as a 6-year-old is just phenomenal. And I was thinking, oh God, his vocabulary is going to be as good as mine in the next year. Where am I going to go with this?
Amazing. I love it.
This is really hard. So, you know, so always think about that. I always at least think of a simple task. So as an example, floating kibble on water might be a good example of that, which is I would start off with, you know, reasonable size pieces that are going to be easy to get hold of.
Yes, small
and in really shallow water so that they can probably push the piece of kibble onto the base of the dish. Yeah, as an example. And that's what I would call my basic level of that game. Then I'm going to have a medium level, and the medium level is going to be probably that the water is slightly deeper, or the kibble size or whatever piece of food we're giving is slightly smaller. And then I might have, you know, kind of a master level, and then I've got a master plus level. And my master plus level might be the water's actually, you know, inches deep, safe, obviously. But actually I've put floating ducks, or I've put some sticks that float on the water, or leaves in the water, as well as the pieces of food.
I think so. I think I know that I'm at fault of this. Like I'm kind of getting a little bit emotional because I'm thinking about Holly and all the things that I used to do with her, and because I was always on the laptop, always just busy, sometimes I added complexity for my own reasoning that I'd have a bit longer to go and do my stuff. And now I'm feeling a bit guilty going, oh, yeah, I did it for me, not for her, because I wanted her to struggle for a little bit longer. That's awful, isn't it? But I think we have to bring...
Don't worry.
Can you imagine if I had a kid? Just going to make it really difficult so I can go and work for 3 hours. Goodbye.
No, but it's in our nature, isn't it? And also it's super exciting when you see that a dog can do something. It's immediately, oh gosh, how far can we push this? Because that's just human nature. But it's important that we think about those little steps of increasing complexity.
So let's talk about it on a neurochemical level as well, in that when they succeed, they're going to get a flush of what we would call positive neurochemicals. So the more that they succeed, the better the brain space. So see it that way, you know. That's how I would like to interpret it.
Exactly. So we talked a little bit about smell, and we've talked, and then what about sights? What do they see out on their walk, and other ways we can do that for them? Maybe it is that, like you said, there might be the buggy option. There's the get them in the car, go for a drive, and just get out and sit somewhere for 5-10 minutes so they can observe the things that they used to observe. Actually, a lot of dogs probably do pay more attention to screens now that we've got such high definition. Sharon Crowell-Davis has done, has done a bit of work on this, I believe, was it Horowitz, but has done some work on this, that dogs now are able to recognize images because of the complexity of the screen. So of course now we've got dog TV channels. If we play them all the time, again, they're just going to switch off. There's no engagement, but we can use things like images and stuff potentially, but also there's real life items. So, it might be different teddy bears, go to car boot sale, go to a charity shop, do just a few garage items, swap
charity shops, brilliant, definitely. I see all these people. Have you been into a pet shop recently? How expensive everything's become, and you buy just a simple toy that is not going to last very long because she's going to pull the squeaker out instantly, and that's 10 quid gone. Charity shops, brilliant.
Yeah, exactly. And swaps with other people. There's a whole host of platforms, aren't there? Like, free space type swappings, as well as marketplace and stuff, and all sorts of things that you can do swaps with. So that's always an option.
Can we go back even just go back a little bit further, because do bear in mind, this isn't your classroom of all of the people that know how you think. There's going to be a lot of owners that have kind of come into this world, and they might be thinking that leaving their dog just laying in their bed is good because they're not using their joints, so they're resting, and that's a good thing, which I have a lot of the time. They're like, oh, well, I just let him sleep all day so that he doesn't hurt himself. Just spending time, interacting, asking them to do games, nose the ball, there's the internal, they just, give paw, get up, move over, come and sit with me over here. All of those things are still very beneficial, aren't they? They're basal.
Well, exactly. And that's part of that social element of it, isn't it? So there's the social element, do they want to be touched? And it should be consensual. So ideally we might offer a little bit of touch. If we know that dog quite well, we offer a bit of touch, and then we just pause, or we take our hand slightly away and we see, is there just a flinch back in our direction? Do they want us to continue? Because one of the things with the osteoarthritic dog, of course, is that sometimes certain types of touch are painful. They might even have enhanced pain. You've talked before about allodynia, hyperesthesia, these things where it's not just painful where the actual arthritis is, and you might have a higher sensitivity to touch. So it's important that we just make observations when we're going to touch them or massage them or groom them. But if they're enjoying those things, just spending the time, just being with our dog, listening to an audiobook together, watching the TV in their space, all of those things can be so beneficial, can't they? Because that's the social element of enrichment.
Absolutely. And it goes back to when I first interviewed you. So me and Amber have only known each other and been friends for a couple of years now. And I was blown away when you came in and did your 2-part series about sleep. And as you say, the social nature of the dog needs to be accommodated. And I know that many people with their heart in the right place go, no, I just leave him in his bed. I let him have a lay in, I just, no, come on, let's spend time with them. Let's try and get more quality time together on their terms. But leaving them in the corner or in the living room, no, ideally not. Or am I overstepping the mark?
No, I don't think so. But obviously it is about consent and about choice, of course. So, maybe that dog does want to rest more, does want to withdraw more. And if we're seeing that, if we're not seeing them choosing to interact, if we come close, if we sit nearby, if we approach them and they don't come back for a second touch, or they actually move their body away from us, then, we probably do need to be speaking to our vet about, how comfortable is my dog? Because if we're at that point with someone who's familiar to them, they don't want to be touched.
I agree.
At time when we're being mindful that we're not just going, oh, hi dog, we're gently offering it and observing. If they're still, I'm not sure, and they're resting more, then of course that needs more veterinary level of assessment, doesn't it, realistically?
Definitely. Carla, write that one down, because that is such a big take home. As I say, I was at this meeting today and one of the vets came up to me and said, oh, my dog's this age and I'm on this medication and I just still feel that things are not right. If you know that things are not right, your social dog who used to enjoy your company is choosing to be elsewhere, that's a time to go and speak to your vet. It might be a comorbidity, it might not be related to the OA, but it could also still be that the pain state isn't controlled. So that's a freaking...
Yeah. You used a posh term there, didn't you? Comorbidity. And one of the things, this is that other things start to go wrong as we get older. And some of that's cognitive. It's in our brain. We don't process stuff. Some of it's sensory. So dogs might lose their sense of smell, or, they might lose their hearing. They might lose their sight. For some animals, though, other senses increase in volume, in intensity, as other senses go down. So maybe as you start to lose your sight because of changes in your eyes as an old dog, your hearing might actually go up for a period of time to try and accommodate that sensory loss. So this is why enrichment is always got to be considered on an individual level. Right back at the beginning we talked about the ethogram of the dog and trying to base some of it on that, but then we do need to refine it for an individual, because maybe they don't want to be touched, maybe they don't want certain noises being played, maybe they actually find certain smells overwhelming, and that's why we've got to make careful observations and modify our plans.
And don't beat yourself up in that if you've chosen to go down, as you say, a more audible kind of process and you've got music on and it just doesn't seem to be working, don't beat yourself up. Go in another direction.
Well, don't assume it's not working either. I did a video clip a while ago which turned out to be more controversial than I intended with my horses. So I play music through a Bluetooth speaker, and I say music, sounds on a Bluetooth speaker often, not every day, but when I'm on, in their space for a period of time. And they've got a huge amount of choice. They've got a hardcore yard and they can move off of it via a wide track to go to paddocks. They're very, very, so that they're not confined. So it's true choice. And I don't have the speaker near them. And I played all sorts of things like classical music pieces, pop, the Muppets, rainforest sound, all sorts of things. And they paid no real attention to it at all. It's been going on for weeks. And I was thinking, do you know what? I don't think they can even hear this. They don't even register it. It's meaningless. And then I had this clip playing, which was a different type of rainforest sound, and a jaguar call came on. My goodness, didn't I get a reaction out of the pair of them? They both suddenly stopped eating, turned to orientate themselves to where the sound was coming from, and got bigger and got a little bit agitated about it. Now, that hadn't been my intention at all. It just happened. I didn't even know the jaguar call was part of that sound compilation. But it just showed me they were listening. Because if they hadn't have been listening, they wouldn't have picked up on that sound. But they were listening and going, we can relax. We don't need to pay attention. And that doesn't mean to say it's not beneficial for them then, does it?
No. It just makes I'm just having a little giggle because downstairs, because I live above work and downstairs, and I do spend too much time at the practice, and I am always with my inpatients because I just want to treat them like my dog. And I often leave music on, and I've just realised that I hate classical, and I've been putting classical on for them. So they might actually hate me.
Well, it is tricky when they're in confinement, isn't it? Because then you're just like, they can't necessarily move away. So, it is tricky. But of course, in a pet dog home, hopefully they have a little bit more choice. But you never want to put anything, and I said this earlier about the smells, it directly in their space. It always needs to be as a background thing to start with, and see what engagement you get, and then move it around a little bit, whether it's a visual thing or a smell thing. Because we're going to end up running out of time, and I know we are, I would like to briefly touch about food enrichment, if I may.
Yes, and I've got one question. So let's do the question, because this lovely lady's been waiting forever. Because you've had, as per usual, a brilliant response from everybody saying where they're from. Carla's my new favourite person in the world ever, and I'm going to start employing her to just do synopses. Carla, get in touch. You're amazing. But there was a lady who was asking about, oh God, where is it? Here you go. This is really important. What do you base their quality of life on then? As you've kind of suggested, getting down to not eating and drinking is probably too far gone. I think let's just clarify that, because I can remember being new to all this a few years back, going, oh shit, but we say that all the time. You know, that is, it's on the literature. You look on their health related quality of life if they've stopped eating. But now I'm like, oh God, you know, it's not a clear cut thing, is it?
No, and again, I suppose to a degree it is more, it's more individual than we would allow, you know, like to think it is.
Yeah.
And I think we also have to, one of the best people or groups of people to kind of judge an animal's quality of life is always going to be their guardian, the person who's lived with them for the longest period of time, because you know you're individual. But yeah, it is, I mean, you know, some elements though of body care I think are important. You know, they do need to be able to make choices about getting up and go to the toilet in a relatively comfortable way. And I say relatively comfortable because when we deal with osteoarthritis and, you know, the back or hips or whatever, when they poo, for some dogs, getting into that position can start to be a little bit less comfortable than it used to be. But clearly if they look like they're anxious around the time that they're going to the toilet, and then they're struggling to hold a position while they're passing urinal feces, then that would be of concern. You know, so it's got to be, you know, relatively comfortable. Yeah, that we might see a little bit of a change in their posture, or maybe the dog starts cocking their leg if they're male, and then they actually have to lower it for the end of the urination. You know, that's not going to cause us huge concern, but it's something to talk to the vet or other health professionals about as a monitoring thing. But they do need to be able to you know, to eliminate and rest and sleep effectively, as well as just eating and drinking.
But there is, and we've got the lovely Andrew Hale, who's one of our advisors, like you're one of our amazing advisors. And one of the topics that we're hoping to tackle, which is going to go against all vet industry direction to evidence-based medicine, everything has to be literature-based, and gut feeling, guttural feeling. How do you, and we do refer to it in literature, you know, how no one knows their dog best than their owner, and empowering that owner to be able to be comfortable with saying, I know that they're not having the life that makes them happy anymore. And I think that's really hard for us as scientists, because we want to try and label in black and white and have like grading schemes. But that's why Andrew's going to come and talk to us. He's going to talk to us about being allowed and controlling that belief as an owner, my gut instinct. So we're going to come to that later this year, so please tune in, guys.
We've got some ideas about it, hopefully, that it is beyond eating and drinking, but it will be individual to some degree. The food thing, I just wanted to say, because one of the issues we have with food as an enrichment is, and we can't go into it in a huge amount of detail, but again, we do need to think about the animal and how they acquire their food naturally and how they eat their food naturally. And both those things need to be filtered in. So the dog is primarily a scavenger, but of course will fall back on predation. That's what large numbers of studies have shown us. And now, obviously, when we think about the osteoarthritic dog, encourage them to chase after and catch and pounce on things. That's probably going to be off our agenda anyway. So let's focus on the scavenging element of it. I'm not talking about taking your dog out and allowing them to, you know, find random sandwiches that are on the ground. That's not safe, you know, but using the nose to find a piece of food is a thing that dogs do, but then they do typically find it relatively easy to consume. You know, so that I found the piece of food and now I can eat it. And typically sometimes with canine enrichment, we've kind of gone the other way. There's no element of finding, here's your, whatever it might be, enrichment device, and you can smell it immediately, but you can't get to it. You know, I'm not actually, I won't do anything. I won't pull out something that's below me in, you know, in stuff that I have sometimes for my dogs or clients' dogs, because I don't want to, you know, be rude about it. It's not intentional about any brand or any particular product, because again, it's horses for courses. What's right for one individual might not be right for another. But we just want to make sure that that is taken into consideration, really, that the dog, particularly the osteoarthritic dog, is able to, I found the thing. And again, initially, maybe I just put one treat in a towel and I just half fold it over. And I've put that, you know, the other side of the room, which is only 1 meter away, 2 meters away. And actually then they get to walk over using their nose to find it, and they've just got to kind of, you know, flip half a piece of towel and they found it. It was really, really simple. Was it even enriching? Yeah, it probably was, particularly if they've not done that kind of activity before. But it shouldn't be then that, well, I can't get to the treat. I can't get it because it's actually wrapped up tightly in a towel with socks around it and, string. Because, that's not ideal. But the other thing that concerns me about that with osteoarthritis dogs more than other groups is that they may spend longer trying to get to it, which is not putting them in a great posture for their arthritis.
In a stressed posture, yeah.
So if we think about, putting pastes or pieces of food on something like a mat, which actually, and freezing it, or it's a bobbly, like a lick type mat, as we call them. There's loads of them, different types of slow feeders, licky mats, those sorts of things. And again, this is not that they're not appropriate for dogs with osteoarthritis, but I'm just going to pick on a Labrador for the sake of it, and I'm really food orientated. And you put that thing on the floor, and this dog's got a sore neck, sore upper back, and sore hips, and now they're lick, 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 lick for 5 to 10 minutes. Most of those dogs probably would lie down, but it's really hard to get their head in the right position to then lick the stuff off of the mat. So that's when we have to be quite individual, and we have to think about, where is this individual's pain? Where's the vet and, and ourselves, between all of us, been able to localize it to, and think about, well, would that posture held for any period of time exacerbate any of that discomfort? So, you can get licky mat type things, which you actually stick onto the wall. And I use them in the clinic all the time. I use them pretty much in every single consultation. And because I keep dogs on the floor rather than having on the table quite often. But, I always set it at a height which appears to be best for that dog, which I'm going to start at sort of just upper chest height. But then I might move a little bit higher, a little bit lower, or for some dogs, I can see immediately that's not working, and I might put it on the floor. But so in our painful dog, we need to think about that, because some dogs will put themselves into positions, and that might be chewing as well, and it might be licking at something, or we might be using food in a way where they're so... Food is the ambrosia. It's true ambrosia. It's true paradise. And therefore that takes precedent over their comfort.
I just always think of dogs that have got bad elbows and their legs getting wider and wider and wider, and their pectoral slings getting more and more stretched, and they're going to get into a position where they're going to fall. No, I totally agree. But that just, again, we need to, as their caregivers, not just buy the item or provide the item, but spend a bit of time watching and checking what the result is and modifying, and not feeling defeated, but feeling, I'm going to twist, I'm going to change. It's still your journey together. One of the things that we have, you've seen our expectation pyramid, which is all the cubes, and at the top is the word rebuild. And I was explaining it today, just saying, well, yes, you're going to think rebuild physically, so you've got muscle mass loss and proprioceptive deficits and restricted range of motion. Rebuilding the bond, you might have been the people that were out there with the ball chuckers and doing the hikes. That time allowance now is doing things together, doing it together. So hopefully you can maintain that beautiful relationship. That's why we have them, because they're freaking wonderful. Thank you, Amber. I'm going to stop there, because I know what will happen is me and you can talk forever, because I absolutely adore listening to you. You've got the same kind of like passion, but you've got the education too.
Quite unfair.
No, so I'm really proud. I'm so proud to say that Amber is one of our advisors. So if you would like to hear more from Amber, there is the member zone, and I'm just being really honest about it. Cam's been going now since 2016, running on eternally close to empty bank account, and our overheads are growing and growing and growing. So we've now developed a member zone. It's £25 for the year. People like you listening are going to change the way that Cam grows. Join the member zone, get amazing content from Amber and the 17 other advisors, loads and loads of new stuff there all the time to keep Cam growing. Something else I want to add is me and Amber are working on a really cool project, and I'm just going to put the survey here. So we're doing some work about common behavioural presentations of musculoskeletal pain in the younger dog. And we would like you to, if your dog is less than 8 years old and they presented with behavioural indications that were then associated with pain, please look at this survey for us. We've had about 90 responses now. The more responses, the more informative it will be. So please do take that time. In the meantime, say thank you to Amber, because she is wonderful. And I believe we have another Facebook Live tomorrow with the lovely Caroline Clark. So 7:30 tomorrow, me and Evie are interviewing Caroline Clark. So please do hang around. It'd be great to see you again. So thank you, Amber.
Well, a huge thanks for having me as an advisor and for this chat. I know Hannah works so hard at maintaining CAM, and it's just the most wonderful facility, to have available to all of us. So, the more we can do to support this and grow as a network of osteoarthritis care providers is just, it's just invaluable for our dog's welfare and therefore for our own well-being too, as part of that relationship, isn't it? So, huge thanks, Hannah, for inviting me and allowing me to talk about this and helping all of us to continue to kind of grow this community.
Yeah, definitely. Let's grow the community. Like the figures now, 37% of dogs of all age categories. If you look at the UK alone, that's going to be 4.35 million dogs at this moment in time are likely to be suffering chronic pain. And there are so many owners out there that don't understand, they don't know. And we, as a collective community, can go and reach out to them. And the idea of CAM is it's a resource that's not going to be inhibitory. It's not going to make people feel guilty. They can touch base with different elements of what we do. They can learn slowly without feeling guilt and discomfort, but there's a really big thing in the vet sector now with owners coming in to see their first opinion vet and feeling like they're being told off, or feeling like they're bad owners because they didn't see the signs. Let's not let that happen. Let's share as a network. Thank you, Amber. I am off.
Thank you, everyone, for listening.
See you guys tomorrow.